Danwoo Kim leaned back in his leather chair, his dark eyes scanning the contract in front of him without really seeing it. At 34 years old, he controlled a powerful Korean syndicate on the East Coast. His legitimate businesses spanned real estate, import-export, and tech investments. But right now, business was the furthest thing from his mind. Nari Park sat perched on the edge of his desk, her designer heels dangling as she scrolled through her phone. Her sleek black hair fell past her shoulders, and her fitted green dress hugged her figure in all the right places. She was the daughter of Chairman Park, one of the most influential Korean businessmen in America, and she had been Danwoo's girlfriend for the past 4 months. "The venue in the Hamptons is confirmed for next month," Nari said, not looking up from her screen. "My mother wants to discuss the guest list this weekend. She's already upset that your side barely has 50 names. Danwoo grunted, non-committally. "I don't have 50 people for the engagement party." Nari finally looked up, her perfectly lined eyes narrowing. "This isn't just a party, Danwoo. It's a statement. Our families coming together is the biggest alliance in the Korean-American business community in decades. People need to see that." Before Danwoo could respond, the glass doors of his office swung open without warning. His head of security, Junho, stumbled in behind a woman who had clearly walked right past him. Junho's hand was on his concealed weapon, his face a mask of controlled alarm. "Sir, I tried to stop her, but she..." Danwoo's words died in his throat. The woman standing in the doorway was not someone he ever expected to see again. She was black, with deep brown skin and natural hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore a faded red Target uniform, the kind that spoke of long shifts and aching feet. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her frame looked thinner than he remembered. But it was what she carried that made Danwoo's heart stop completely. A car seat, and inside the car seat, wrapped in a soft blue blanket, was a sleeping newborn baby. Nari slid off the desk, her heels clicking against the marble as she straightened. "Who the hell is this?" The woman ignored her entirely. Her eyes were locked on Danwoo with an intensity that could have cut through steel. "Danwoo," she said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion etched into every line of her face. "Meet your son. His name is Caleb. He's 3 weeks old." The silence that followed was deafening. Danwoo didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink. Nari's head swiveled between the woman and Danwoo, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to barely contained fury. "You're what?" Nari's voice came out sharp enough to shatter glass. The woman walked forward, her worn sneakers making no sound on the expensive floor. She set the car seat directly on Danwoo's mahogany desk, right on top of the contracts worth millions of dollars. "You ghosted me when I was 2 months pregnant," she continued, her voice never wavering. "You changed your number, you moved offices, you made yourself disappear like I was nothing, like what we had was nothing." Danwoo's mouth opened, but no words came out. The woman reached into the worn bag hanging from her shoulder and pulled out a folded envelope. She dropped it on the desk next to the car seat with a soft thud. "Paternity test, 99.9% match. He's yours, Danwoo. There's no question. There's no doubt he's your son." The baby stirred, making a small sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silent office. His tiny fist escaped the blanket, waving in the air for a moment before settling back down. Nari stepped forward, her composure cracking. "Danwoo, who is this woman? What is she talking about? You need to explain this right now." But Danwoo couldn't take his eyes off the baby, off the tiny face that was slowly scrunching up as consciousness crept in, off the eyes that were beginning to flutter open. And when they did, when those eyes finally opened and looked up at the bright office lights, Danwoo felt the ground shift beneath his feet. They were amber, dark amber with flecks of gold, the exact same rare color that had been passed down through the Kim family for 4 generations. His grandmother's eyes, his father's eyes. His eyes. "His name is Evelyn," Junho said quietly from behind, having done a rapid background check on his phone the moment she walked in. "Evelyn Carter, 28 years old. Nursing student at CUNY, part-time retail worker, no criminal record, no known affiliations. Evelyn didn't acknowledge the security chief. Her attention remained fixed on Danwu. "I'm not here for your money," she said, and there was something in her voice, a weariness, a resignation that made Danwu's chest tighten. "I didn't want to come here at all. I spent 7 months convincing myself I could do this alone, that I didn't need anything from you." She paused, and for the first time a crack appeared in her armor, a flicker of fear behind the steel. "But your enemies found out about him, Danwu. I don't know how, but they know. They know Caleb exists, and they know he's yours." Nari let out a sharp laugh. "This is insane. This is absolutely insane. Danwu, tell me this woman is lying. Tell me this is some kind of scam." Danwu finally tore his gaze away from the baby and looked at Evelyn. Really looked at her. 8 months ago, a jazz bar in Greenwich Village. She had been sitting alone at the bar, reading a thick nursing textbook while nursing a glass of wine she clearly couldn't afford. He had been there to meet a contact, but the meeting ended early. He stayed because he couldn't stop looking at her. She laughed at his terrible jokes. She challenged his opinions on everything from politics to pizza toppings. She didn't know who he was, didn't know about the empire, the blood, the darkness. To her, he was just Daniel, a businessman who worked too much and smiled too little. They dated for 3 months. 3 months of dinners in Brooklyn, walks through Central Park, lazy Sunday mornings in her tiny apartment in Jersey City. 3 months of him feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Human. And then his world came crashing in. A rival family discovered he had a weakness. They started following her, taking photos, making plans. So he did what he thought was the noble thing. He disappeared, changed his number, moved his offices, erased himself from her life completely. He told himself he was protecting her. He never knew she was pregnant. "I'm not here for me," Evelyn said, her voice pulling him back to the present. "I'm here because 3 days ago, 2 men in black suits showed up at my job asking questions about Mr. Kim's baby. My manager fired me on the spot because he didn't want trouble. Yesterday, someone broke into my apartment while I was getting groceries. They didn't take anything. They just left a note on Caleb's crib." She reached into her bag again and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. She unfolded it and held it up so Danwu could see the words written in neat, precise handwriting. "Cute kid." Danwu's blood ran cold. "They're coming for my son," Evelyn said. "Your son. And I don't have the money, the power, or the resources to stop them. So I swallowed my pride, and I came to the only person who can protect him." She turned to leave, and for a moment, Danwu thought she was going to walk out and leave the baby there. But she stopped at the door and looked back over her shoulder. "I don't expect you to be a father. I don't expect you to suddenly care about me or what we had. But I do expect you to protect your own blood, because if you don't, they will take him. And they will use him against you, and then they will kill us both when they're done." She walked out, leaving the baby on his desk. Caleb chose that exact moment to wake up fully and start crying. Nari was talking, yelling, actually, her words blending into a blur of accusations and demands for explanations. Junho was on his phone, barking orders to the security team. The office was erupting into chaos. But Danwu heard none of it. He was staring at his son, at this tiny human being who carried his blood and his eyes, and he was feeling something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Terror. "Now let me ask you something real quick. If you were Nari right now, standing in your boyfriend's office watching his ex walk in with a whole newborn baby, what would you do? Would you stay and fight for the relationship, or would you walk out that door and never look back? Drop your answer in the comments below. And hey, if you're watching this story and you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, go ahead and hit that button right now. Trust me. You're going to want to stick around because this story is about to get so much messier. Like this video too, because the drama is just getting started. The moment the office doors closed behind Evelyn, Nari erupted. "You have exactly 30 seconds to explain what just happened," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "Who is that woman? Why does she have a baby? And why is she claiming it's yours?" Danwu finally moved. He stood slowly, his eyes never leaving the crying infant on his desk. His hand reached out, hesitated, then gently touched the car seat's handle. "Her name is Evelyn Carter," he said quietly. "I met her 8 months ago." 8 months? Nari's laugh was brittle. "We've been together for 4 months, Danwu, which means you were seeing her while we were." "No," he cut her off, his voice firm. "I ended things with her before you and I ever started. There was no overlap." "Then why didn't I know about her?" Nari demanded. "Why is this the first time I'm hearing that you had some secret relationship with?" She gestured vaguely toward the door Evelyn had exited through. "With her." Danwu finally looked at Nari, and something in his expression made her take a step back. "Because I thought it was over. I thought I had protected her by walking away. I didn't know she was pregnant." Caleb's crying intensified. Danwu looked down at the baby, helpless. He had no idea what to do. He had never held an infant in his life. Nari shook her head slowly, processing. "This is a disaster. Do you understand what this means? Our engagement, our family's alliance, everything we've been planning." "Nari," Danwu's voice cut through her spiral, "I need you to leave." Her eyes widened. "Excuse me." "I need to deal with this. I need to think. And I can't do that with you here demanding explanations I don't have yet." For a long moment, Nari just stared at him. Then something hardened in her expression. She grabbed her designer purse from the desk, careful to avoid the car seat like it was contaminated. "My father is going to hear about this," she said coldly. "Whatever we had, Danwu, whatever we were building, you just destroyed it." She stormed out, her heels clicking a furious rhythm against the marble. The moment she was gone, Danwu sagged. He braced his hands on the desk and stared at the crying baby. "Sir," Junho approached cautiously, "what are your orders?" Danwu was quiet for a long moment. Then he straightened. "Find Evelyn Carter. Don't lose her. And get me everything you have on recent Yoon syndicate movements. If they're the ones who found out about the baby, I need to know how." "And the child, sir?" Danwu looked at Caleb. The baby's crying had softened to whimpers, his tiny chest heaving with the effort. "Get a pediatric nurse up here, someone discreet, someone who knows how to take care of a newborn." As Junho stepped away to make calls, Danwu did something he hadn't done in years. He reached down and carefully, awkwardly, lifted his son out of the car seat. Caleb was so light, so fragile. His tiny body fit in Danwu's large hands like he was made of paper and air. The baby looked up at him with those amber eyes, and stopped crying. For a moment, father and son simply stared at each other. And in that moment, Danwu felt something inside him shift, something fundamental and irreversible. He didn't know how to be a father. He didn't know if he could protect this child from the world he lived in. He didn't know if Evelyn would ever forgive him for disappearing. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Anyone who tried to hurt this baby would die. Meanwhile, Evelyn was in the elevator, descending 87 floors with tears streaming silently down her face. She had done it. She had walked into the lion's den and faced the man who had shattered her heart. She had left her son with a stranger, a dangerous stranger, a crime lord, a man who had abandoned her without a word. But what choice did she have? 3 days ago, her world had collapsed. The men in suits at her job, the break-in at her apartment, the note that still made her hands shake when she thought about it. She had tried to run, packed a bag, grabbed Caleb, headed for the bus station. She was going to go somewhere far away, maybe down to Atlanta where her aunt lived, or out to a small town where no one would find them. But then she saw him, a man in a dark coat standing on the corner across from the bus station, watching her. He didn't approach, didn't threaten. He just watched, and when their eyes met, he smiled. That smile told her everything she needed to know. She couldn't run. They would find her. They would always find her. So she came here instead. The elevator doors opened to the building's lobby, all gleaming glass and polished stone. Evelyn walked through it like a ghost, her target uniform attracting dismissive glances from the suited professionals around her. She was almost to the exit when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. Hello. Ms. Carter. The voice was male, smooth, cultured. I see you've delivered our message. Evelyn's blood turned to ice. Who is this? A friend or an enemy. That depends entirely on what you do next. What do you want? The same thing everyone wants, Ms. Carter. Leverage. And right now, your son is the most valuable piece of leverage on the eastern seaboard. Evelyn stopped walking. She was trembling now, her free hand gripping the fabric of her uniform. I went to his father. I did what you wanted. Just leave us alone. Oh, we're past that now. The voice was almost sympathetic. You see, Danwoo Kim has something that belongs to my family, something that was taken from us 20 years ago. And little Caleb, he's going to help us get it back. He's just a baby, Evelyn whispered. He's just a baby. Exactly. Bobbies are so fragile, aren't they? So vulnerable, so easy to. The line went dead. Evelyn stood frozen in the middle of the lobby, her phone pressed to her ear, her entire body shaking. She had made a terrible mistake. She had thought going to Danwoo would solve her problems, that his power, his resources, his world would protect her son. But she had only made things worse. She had confirmed to his enemies exactly what they suspected. She had painted a target on her baby's back in permanent ink. And now she had no idea what to do. The answer came 30 minutes later, when she was sitting on a bench in Madison Square Park, staring at nothing, trying to figure out her next move. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. The back door opened. Danwoo stepped out. He was still wearing his tailored suit, but something about him had changed. There was an intensity in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a purpose. And in his arms, bundled carefully in the blue blanket, was Caleb. Get in the car, Danwoo said. Evelyn stood, her heart hammering. I'm not going anywhere with you. They called you. I know they did. My security intercepted the signal. They're tracking your phone, Evelyn. They know exactly where you are right now, and they have people moving toward this location. As if to punctuate his words, Evelyn saw movement in her peripheral vision. 2 men in dark coats, approaching from the east side of the park. Get in the car, Danwoo repeated, his voice harder this time. Or stay here and see what they do when they catch you without my protection. Evelyn looked at the approaching men, looked at Danwoo, looked at her son in his arms. She got in the car. The door slammed shut behind her, and the SUV peeled away from the curb, leaving the 2 men standing empty-handed on the sidewalk. The car ride was silent except for Caleb's occasional coos and gurgles. He seemed perfectly content in Danwoo's arms, which irritated Evelyn more than she wanted to admit. Where are we going? She finally asked. Somewhere safe. That's not an answer. Danwoo looked at her, and for a moment she saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or regret. I have a penthouse in Tribeca. Bulletproof windows, private elevator, armed security on every floor. It's the most secure location in the city. You want me to live with you? I want you alive. I want my son alive. Right now, that requires proximity. Evelyn turned to look out the window, watching the city blur past. Her jaw was tight, her shoulders tense. I spent 7 months thinking you just got bored of me, she said quietly. That I was just another girl you played with until something better came along. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after you disappeared. I tried to call you. The number was disconnected. I tried to find you. It was like you never existed. Danwoo was silent. I saw a news article about you 3 months ago, she continued. Some business magazine piece about the enigmatic CEO of Kim Industries. That's when I realized who you really were. That's when I understood why you vanished. Evelyn, you could have told me, her voice cracked. You could have trusted me with the truth. Instead, you just disappeared, and I had to go through my entire pregnancy alone. I had to give birth alone. I had to hold my son for the first time and wonder if his father would ever know he existed. Caleb made a small sound, as if sensing his mother's distress. Danwoo looked down at the baby, then back at Evelyn. I was trying to protect you. By abandoning me. By removing you from my world. The people I deal with, the things I've done, I didn't want that anywhere near you. I thought if I disappeared cleanly enough, they would never know you existed. They would never connect you to me. Well, that worked out great, didn't it? Evelyn's voice was bitter. Danwoo had no response to that. They arrived at the Tribeca penthouse 20 minutes later. It was exactly as Danwoo had described, a fortress disguised as a luxury apartment. The elevator required biometric scanning to operate. The windows were subtly reinforced. Armed men in casual clothes patrolled the hallways. Evelyn was shown to a guest wing that was larger than her entire apartment in Jersey City. There was a nursery already set up, brand new furniture, unopened packages of diapers and formula, a crib that probably cost more than her car. How? She asked, staring at the perfectly prepared room. I had my team arrange everything while we were driving, Danwoo said. Money makes things happen quickly. Evelyn sat down on the edge of the bed, Caleb now in her arms. She felt overwhelmed, exhausted, and completely out of her depth. My sister, she said suddenly. Marissa, she was staying with me, if they're watching my apartment. Already handled. She's being brought here as well. Evelyn looked up at him, surprised. You didn't have to do that. She's your family. She's Caleb's family. That makes her my responsibility now, too. Something in his tone made Evelyn's heart do something complicated. She pushed it down ruthlessly. This doesn't change anything, she said firmly. I'm here because I have no choice, not because I forgive you, not because I trust you. I know. Good, as long as we're clear. Danwoo nodded and turned to leave. At the door, he paused. For what it's worth, Evelyn, I never stopped thinking about you, not for a single day. He was gone before she could respond. Marissa arrived 2 hours later, escorted by 2 of Danwoo's security team. She was a younger version of Evelyn, same brown skin, same sharp eyes, but with a more expressive face and a mouth that ran a mile a minute. Okay, what the entire hell? Marissa demanded the moment she walked into the penthouse. 2 extremely scary men showed up at my dorm room and told me I had to come with them immediately for my safety. Then they put me in a car that costs more than my entire student loan debt and drove me to this insane apartment. Evelyn, what is going on? Evelyn spent the next hour explaining everything. Danwoo, the relationship, the pregnancy, the threats, all of it. When she finished, Marissa was quiet for a long moment. So let me get this straight, she finally said. The man you were seeing last year, the one you cried over for literally months, he's actually a Korean mafia boss, and he didn't know you were pregnant. And now some rival gang wants to kidnap your baby to use as leverage against him, and we're hiding out in his Tribeca penthouse while he figures out how to stop them. That's the summary, yes. Marissa let out a low whistle. Girl, your life is a whole Netflix series. Despite everything, Evelyn laughed. It felt foreign, like she had forgotten how. How are you so calm about this? Marissa shrugged. I'm not calm, I'm terrified. But I'm also a broke college student who just got relocated to a penthouse with a fully stocked kitchen and a view of the Manhattan skyline. I'm processing the terror while also appreciating the amenities. Before Evelyn could respond, there was a knock at the door of the guest wing. Junho appeared, his expression professionally neutral. Ms. Carter, Mr. Kim would like you to join him in the main living area. There's someone here you should meet. Evelyn's guard immediately went up. Who? His girlfriend, Ms. Park. Evelyn felt her stomach drop. Of course, the woman from the office. The one in the designer dress and perfect makeup who had looked at Evelyn like she was dirt tracked in on expensive shoes. I don't think that's a good idea. Mr. Kim insisted. He wants to handle this situation openly. No secrets. Evelyn wanted to refuse. Wanted to hide in this guest wing with her son and her sister and pretend the rest of the world didn't exist. But she thought about Caleb, about the life he would have to navigate if he grew up in Danwoo's world, about the importance of facing challenges head-on instead of avoiding them. Fine, she said. Watch Caleb for me, Marissa. Marissa took the sleeping baby with practiced ease. Go handle your drama, sis. I've got my nephew. The main living area was a masterpiece of modern design, all clean lines and neutral tones and art that probably cost more than most houses. Nari Park stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, her silhouette sharp against the city lights. She turned when Evelyn entered, and her expression was pure ice. "So you're staying here," Nari said. It wasn't a question. Evelyn stopped several feet away, keeping distance between them. "I don't have a choice. Someone is trying to kidnap my son." "Your son?" Nari laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Tell me something. When you showed up at his office today with that baby, did you think about the damage you would cause? Did you think about the families involved, the business relationships, the carefully constructed plans that you just blew apart?" "I thought about keeping my child alive." "How convenient. A baby appears out of nowhere, and suddenly you're installed in his home, under his protection with his full attention. Some might call that strategic." Evelyn felt her temper rising. "Are you seriously suggesting I got pregnant on purpose as some kind of long-term scheme? I didn't even know who he really was until 3 months ago." "So you say." "I have evidence, documentation of my pregnancy, hospital records. Everything is time-stamped and verified. I'm not a gold digger, Ms. Park. I'm a nursing student who made the mistake of falling for a man who lied to me about who he was. And now, you expect me to believe you're not here to take him from me." Evelyn actually laughed. The sound surprised them both. "Take him? I don't want him. Do you understand that? I wanted Daniel, the man who argued with me about pizza toppings and fell asleep during movies and made me feel like I mattered. That man doesn't exist. He never existed. What's left is a stranger who happens to be the father of my child, and I'm only here because that stranger is the only person powerful enough to protect my son." Nari studied her for a long moment, searching for deception, finding none. "You really don't want him back." "I want my baby safe. I want to finish my nursing degree. I want to build a life for myself and my son that doesn't involve bulletproof windows and armed guards. That's all I want. You can have him." Something in Nari's expression shifted, not quite believing, but considering. Before either woman could speak again, Danwoo entered the room. He had changed from his suit into more casual clothes, black slacks and a dark sweater that somehow made him look even more intimidating. "Nari, I didn't expect you back so soon." Nari turned to face him, her earlier coldness returning. "My father has questions. Our entire alliance is built on stability, Danwoo. An illegitimate child threatens that stability." "Caleb is not illegitimate. He's my son, my heir." Nari's eyes widened. "Your heir? You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life. This will destroy everything we've built. The Park family. We'll adapt or not. I'm not hiding my son. I'm not pretending he doesn't exist. And I'm certainly not abandoning his mother to be killed by the Yoon Syndicate just to make your father comfortable." Evelyn watched this exchange with surprise. She hadn't expected Danwoo to be so definitive, so protective. Nari's composure finally cracked. "You're choosing them over me, over us." "I'm choosing my son. That's not a choice. That's an obligation, a duty, something I should have fulfilled months ago if I had known." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Finally, Nari straightened, gathering her dignity like armor. "I need to think about this, about us, about what I'm willing to accept." "Take all the time you need." Nari walked toward the elevator, pausing as she passed Evelyn. Their eyes met. "Don't get comfortable," Nari said quietly. "Whatever you think is happening here, it's temporary. He'll remember who he is eventually, and when he does, you and your baby will be liabilities he can't afford." She disappeared into the elevator, leaving her words hanging in the air like poison. The first week in the penthouse was an exercise in careful avoidance. Evelyn stayed in her wing with Caleb and Marissa, only venturing out when necessary. Danwoo kept to his office and his meetings, though she noticed he always seemed to appear whenever Caleb was crying. He would stand in the doorway, watching, never quite entering, like he wanted to help but didn't know how. On the 7th night, something changed. Caleb had been fussy all evening, refusing to settle. Evelyn had tried everything, feeding, changing, rocking, singing, but nothing worked. By midnight, she was exhausted, frustrated, and on the verge of tears herself. She was packing the nursery, bouncing Caleb gently and murmuring soothing nonsense, when Danwoo appeared in the doorway. "Let me try," he said. Evelyn was too tired to argue. She handed over the crying baby and slumped into the nearby armchair. Danwoo held Caleb awkwardly at first, his large hands unsure of where to go. But then he started humming, a low, melodic tune that Evelyn didn't recognize. Korean, she assumed, something from his childhood. Within minutes, Caleb's crying softened to hiccups. Within 5 more, he was asleep. "How did you do that?" Evelyn asked, genuinely amazed. "My grandmother used to sing this to me when I was small. I didn't think I remembered it until just now." Danwoo looked at the sleeping baby in his arms, and his expression was unguarded in a way Evelyn had never seen before. "He has her eyes, my grandmother's eyes. She died when I was 12. I thought I would never see those eyes again." Evelyn felt something soften in her chest despite her best efforts. "Tell me about her." So Danwoo did. He talked about his grandmother, a fierce woman who had survived war and immigration and the loss of her husband. He talked about his childhood in Queens, before the money and the power and the blood. He talked about the moment his father brought him into the business and the moment he realized there was no way out. He talked until the sky outside began to lighten, and Evelyn realized they had been talking for hours. "I should let you sleep," he finally said, standing carefully so as not to wake Caleb. "Wait," the word escaped before Evelyn could stop it. Danwoo paused. "Why did you really leave? The truth this time, not the noble protector story you've been selling." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at her, and his eyes were raw with something she had never seen in him before. "Honesty. Because you terrified me," he said. "Not because of the danger you were in, though that was real, but because of how you made me feel. I had spent my entire adult life believing I couldn't have normal things. Love, family, a woman who looked at me like I was just a man instead of a weapon." He moved back toward her, sitting on the edge of the chair across from hers. "And then you came along, and suddenly I wanted all of it. Every normal thing I had convinced myself I didn't deserve. And that wanting, it scared me more than any rival family ever could. So I ran. I told myself it was protection, but really it was cowardice." Evelyn didn't know what to say. She had wanted answers for so long, and now that she had them, she wasn't sure how to process them. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Danwoo continued. "I don't deserve it. I abandoned you when you needed me most. I let you go through pregnancy and childbirth alone. I can never undo that." "No, you can't. But I can try to do better, starting now. Starting with protecting our son and giving you whatever you need to feel safe and secure. I know that doesn't erase what I did. I know you may never trust me again. But I'm going to try anyway, because that's the only thing I can do." Evelyn studied him for a long moment. This man who controlled empires and armies and billions of dollars, sitting before her with his heart stripped bare. "I can't forgive you yet," she said finally. "I don't know if I ever can, but I can. Try to stop hating you, for Caleb's sake." Something that might have been hope flickered in Danwoo's eyes. "That's more than I deserve." "Yes, it is." He almost smiled. "Get some sleep, Evelyn. Tomorrow we need to discuss what comes next. The Yoon Syndicate won't wait forever." He left, taking his warmth and his grandmother's lullaby with him. Evelyn sat in the quiet nursery, watching her son sleep peacefully for the first time in days, and wondered when exactly her heart had started to thaw. The next morning brought chaos. Junho burst into the penthouse during breakfast with news that made everyone's blood run cold. The Yoon Syndicate had made contact. They had sent a formal invitation, if it could be called that, for Danwoo to meet with their leader, Vincent Yoon. And they wanted him to bring Evelyn and Caleb. "Absolutely not," Danwoo said immediately. "They're not going anywhere near him." "They said it was a condition for any negotiation," Junho reported. "They want to see the heir with their own eyes." "It's a trap." Almost certainly, but refusing means open war. They have resources, Danwu. Not as many as you, but enough to make things very bloody very quickly. Danwu's jaw tightened. He looked at Evelyn, who was holding Caleb protectively against her chest. I'll go alone. I'll offer them something else. Territory, money, trade routes, something. They were very specific, Junho said. The mother and the child or no meeting. The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications. What do they actually want? Evelyn asked quietly. Beyond just leverage, what's the endgame? Danwu exchanged a look with Junho before answering. The Yoon family and my family have been enemies for 20 years. It started with my father and Vincent's father. A deal went bad. People died. Vincent's father ended up in prison, where he was killed 6 months later. Vincent has been building toward revenge ever since. And Caleb fits into that how? I have no sons, no heirs. My bloodline ends with me, or it did until you showed up with Caleb. Vincent sees an opportunity. If he controls my heir, he controls my legacy. And if he can raise Caleb as his own... Danwu didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Evelyn felt sick. He wants to take my baby and raise him as a Yoon. It's one possibility. There are others, none of them good. So what do we do? Danwu was quiet for a long moment. Then he straightened, and Evelyn saw the crime lord emerge, the cold, calculating strategist who had built an empire from blood and will. We prepare for war, but first we need more information. Junho, I want surveillance on every known Yoon associate in the city. I want to know their movements, their contacts, their weaknesses. Already in progress. Good, I'm also calling in reinforcements. Old alliances, outstanding debts. Everyone who owes me is about to get a call. Junho nodded and departed to execute orders. Danwu turned to Evelyn. I need you to stay in the penthouse. Don't leave for any reason. If you need anything, my team will get it for you. I understand. And Evelyn, he hesitated. Whatever happens, I won't let them touch Caleb. I swear it on my grandmother's grave. She believed him. That was the terrifying part. She actually believed him. 3 days later, they got the information they needed. One of Danwu's informants inside the Yoon organization revealed the full scope of Vincent's plan. It wasn't just about taking Caleb, it was about destroying Danwu entirely. Vincent had made an alliance with Chairman Park, Nari's father, the same man whose daughter Danwu had been planning to marry. It makes sense, Junho explained during the briefing. Chairman Park has been trying to legitimize his businesses for years. Danwu was useful for that, a powerful ally who could protect his interests. But an illegitimate child with an outsider, a scandal, that threatens everything Chairman Park has built. So he went to Vincent, Danwu said flatly. They've been negotiating for weeks, apparently. Chairman Park provides financial backing and legitimate business fronts. Vincent provides the muscle and the operational control. Together, they plan to take over your territory and split it between them. And Caleb. Junho hesitated. Vincent still wants the child. Chairman Park doesn't care what happens to him as long as the scandal is contained. The implication hung in the air like poison. Evelyn spoke up from the corner where she had been listening. They want to kill my son. They want options, Junho clarified carefully. Control if possible, elimination if necessary. Danwu's hands curled into fists. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Does Nari know about her father's involvement? Unclear. She's been in Lowe's Angels for the past week, visiting family. She may be completely in the dark. Or she may have been the one who told him where to find Evelyn in the first place. Evelyn felt her blood turn to ice. She thought about her conversation with Nari, the way the woman had looked at her, the veiled threats. What do we do now? She asked. Danwu turned to face her, and his expression was terrifying in its calm. Now we stop playing defense. Now we go on the attack. The next phase began with information warfare. Danwu's people spent days compiling evidence, financial records, communication intercepts, photographs of secret meetings. They built a case that would be devastating if released. Not criminal prosecution, necessarily, but complete social and business destruction. But gathering information was a two-way street. One evening, Evelyn received an unexpected delivery. A small package left at the building's reception desk, addressed to her by name. Inside was a burner phone and a handwritten note. "He's lying to you. Ask HIM about the fire in Newark. Ask HIM what really happened to his first wife." A friend. Evelyn stared at the note for a long time. First wife. She didn't know Danwoo had been married before. He had never mentioned it, not during their relationship, not in any of their conversations since. What else hadn't he told her? She found him in his study that night, surrounded by reports and documents. When she placed the note on his desk, his expression flickered, just for a moment, before settling back into careful neutrality. "Where did you get this?" "It was delivered to the building. Someone wants me to distrust you." "Someone from the Park-Yun Alliance, most likely. They're trying to drive a wedge between us." "Then it should be easy to explain, right? Just tell me about your first wife and the Newark fire, and I'll know they're lying." Danwoo was quiet for a long, painful moment. Then he stood and walked to the window, his back to her. "Her name was Sujin. She was Korean, from a family allied with mine. Our marriage was arranged, a business merger dressed up as a wedding. We didn't love each other, but we were trying to find a way to coexist." He paused, and Evelyn saw his shoulders tense. 5 years ago, the Yoon Syndicate attacked a restaurant in Newark where Sujin was having dinner with her family. They set fire to the building. 15 people died, including Sujin and 3 of her cousins. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. Vincent Yoon's father had just died in prison. This was Vincent's declaration of war, proof that he was willing to go further than anyone expected. He killed an innocent woman and her family just to send me a message. Danwoo finally turned to face her, and his eyes were haunted. "I identified her body at the morgue. I stood at her funeral and accepted condolences from people who secretly celebrated her death, because it meant the alliance between our families was broken. And I swore that day that I would never let anyone I cared about become a target again." Understanding dawned on Evelyn. "That's why you left me. I convinced myself that loving you was the same as killing you. That if I got too close, Vincent would find out and use you against me, just like he used Sujin. But he found out anyway. Because I underestimated him, because I thought disappearing would be enough. I was wrong, and now you and Caleb are paying for my mistake." Evelyn didn't know what to say. This was so much bigger than she had realized, so much more dangerous. She thought about her tiny apartment in Jersey City, her nursing textbooks, her simple dreams of a stable career and a happy family. How naive she had been. "The person who sent this note," she said slowly, "they wanted me to think you were hiding something sinister, that you were responsible for the fire somehow. It's a common tactic. Mix truth with implication. Let the target's imagination do the rest. But instead, I understand you better now." She hesitated. "I understand why you made the choices you made. That doesn't mean I forgive you." "I know. But it means I'm not as angry as I was before. You weren't just running from me. You were running from a ghost." Danwoo's expression cracked just slightly. Sujin didn't deserve what happened to her. She was kind, gentle, completely unsuited for this world, and I couldn't protect her. "That wasn't your fault. It was my world that killed her. That makes it my fault." Evelyn crossed the room until she was standing in front of him, close enough to see the pain he usually kept hidden, close enough to see the man behind the monster. "You can't carry that guilt forever," she said quietly, "and you can't let it stop you from protecting the people you care about now. Caleb needs a father who's present, not one who's so afraid of loss that he keeps everyone at arm's length." Danwoo looked at her with something raw in his eyes. "How are you so strong? After everything I put you through, how are you not more broken?" "Who says I'm not broken?" Evelyn's voice was soft. "I cry myself to sleep most nights. I have nightmares about men taking Caleb away. I don't know who I am anymore or what my life is supposed to look like. But I get up every morning because my son needs me. I keep going because the alternative is giving up, and I refuse to give up. You're extraordinary, Danwoo said, and the words sounded like a revelation. I'm a mother, that's all. That's everything. They stood there in the quiet of his study, two damaged people carrying impossible burdens, and something shifted between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding, connection. A foundation they might someday build on. The attack came 3 nights later. It was past midnight. Evelyn had just gotten Caleb to sleep after a fussy evening. Marissa was watching a movie in her room with headphones. The penthouse was quiet, peaceful. Then the alarms started screaming. Evelyn grabbed Caleb from his crib, heart pounding, and ran into the hallway. Junho was already there, weapon drawn, face grim. Vincent's people breached the building's security perimeter. We have maybe 3 minutes before they reach this floor. Where's Danwoo? On his way back from a meeting downtown. He's 15 minutes out. 15 minutes, an eternity. Junho grabbed her arm and started pulling her toward the back of the penthouse. There's a panic room. Reinforced walls, independent air supply, secure communications. You and your sister get inside and don't come out until I personally give you the all clear. Marissa appeared, wide-eyed and terrified. What's happening? No time to explain. Move. They made it to the panic room just as the sounds of gunfire erupted from somewhere below. Junho pushed them inside and started to close the heavy steel door. Wait, Evelyn said. What about you? I'll hold them off. Just keep that baby quiet and stay alive. The door sealed shut with a hydraulic hiss, and then it was just Evelyn, Marissa, and Caleb in a small steel box, listening to the muffled sounds of violence outside. Marissa was shaking. Oh my God, Evelyn, this isn't happening. It's happening. Evelyn's voice was steadier than she felt. And we're going to survive it. Here, hold Caleb. I need to find the communications panel. She found it, a small screen built into the wall with options for calling emergency services or contacting Danwoo's security network. She punched the button for Danwoo's direct line. He answered immediately. Evelyn, are you in the panic room? Yes, Junho got us in just before. A massive crash echoed through the walls. What's happening out there? Vincent's people are trying to breach the penthouse. My team is holding them, but there are a lot of them, more than we expected. How long until you get here? 12 minutes, maybe 10 if my driver breaks every traffic law in the city. Another crash, closer this time. Caleb started to cry. Just get here, Evelyn said, trying to keep her voice calm. Please just get here. I'm coming. I swear to you I'm coming. The line went dead. The next 10 minutes were the longest of Evelyn's life. She held Caleb close, singing the lullaby she had heard Danwoo hum, trying to soothe him while chaos raged outside. Marissa sat in the corner, arms wrapped around her knees, praying under her breath. Then, suddenly, the sound stopped. Silence, complete terrible silence. Evelyn strained to hear anything, footsteps, voices. Anything that would tell her what was happening, but there was nothing. A knock on the panic room door made both women jump. Evelyn, Danwoo's voice muffled by the steel. It's over, you can open the door. Evelyn hesitated. How do I know it's really you? The first night we met, you were reading a textbook about cardiac care. I made a terrible joke about it, and you laughed anyway because you said you admired persistence. She opened the door. Danwoo was covered in blood, not his own, based on how he was moving. He pulled her into his arms, crushing her and Caleb together against his chest. You're safe, he breathed. Thank God you're safe. Behind him, the penthouse was a war zone. Broken furniture, shattered glass, bodies being removed by Danwoo's security team. Junho sat on a couch, getting a wound on his arm bandaged, but alive. How many? Evelyn asked, dreading the answer. 3 of my people injured, none dead. 8 of Vincent's dead, 4 captured for questioning. And Vincent. Danwoo's expression darkened. He wasn't here. He sent his men to do his dirty work while he stayed safely in Chicago. So it's not over. No, but it will be. Tonight proved that he's willing to go to any length to get to Caleb. That means I have to end this permanently, or we'll be looking over our shoulders forever. Evelyn looked at the destruction around her, at the blood on Danwoo's clothes, at the reality of the life she had stumbled into. What do you need me to do? Danwoo pulled back and looked at her with something like awe. You're asking to help, after everything that just happened. That man wants to take my son. I'm done hiding. I'm done being the damsel in the panic room. Tell me what you're planning and tell me how I can help. For the first time since the siege began, Danwoo smiled. The plan came together over the next 72 hours. Danwoo's captured men talked, with encouragement, and revealed crucial information. Vincent Yoon was planning to attend a private gathering at a mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. He would be meeting with Chairman Park to finalize their alliance. It was the perfect opportunity to end both threats simultaneously. But they couldn't just attack. That would start an all-out war with casualties on both sides. They needed something cleaner, something permanent. Evidence, Danwoo explained during the strategy meeting. We've been compiling it for months. Financial crimes, conspiracy to commit violence, trafficking connections. Enough to bring them both down in the legal system. Will that actually work? Evelyn asked. Men like them usually buy their way out of trouble. Not if the evidence is overwhelming and public. Not if every news outlet in the country has copies. Not if their business partners and legitimate connections see exactly who they've been dealing with. Junho pulled up diagrams on a screen. The gathering is happening 3 days from now. Security will be tight, but we have people who can get inside, plant recording devices, capture conversations. And then we release everything simultaneously. Federal authorities, media outlets, social media, their empires collapse overnight. Their partners flee. Their protection evaporates. Evelyn studied the plans. What's my role? You don't have one, Danwoo said immediately. This is too dangerous. You need someone who can move through spaces your people can't. Someone who isn't known to Vincent or Chairman Park. Someone they won't suspect. Absolutely not. I'm not asking for permission. I'm asking for the right training and information to be effective. Danwoo's jaw tightened. If something happens to you. Then Caleb still has his father. But if we don't end this now, he grows up looking over his shoulder forever. I won't accept that life for him. They stared at each other, will against will. Junho cleared his throat. If I may, Ms. Carter has already demonstrated significant resourcefulness under pressure. With proper preparation, she could be an asset. Danwoo closed his eyes. Evelyn could see him wrestling with himself, torn between his need to protect her and his recognition that she was right. Fine, he finally said. But you stay in the outer perimeter. You plant your device and you get out. If anything goes wrong, you run. Promise me. I promise. And I'm putting a tracker on you. Non-negotiable. Fine. And you train with my team for the next 2 days. Combat basics, evasion tactics, communication protocols. Also fine. Danwoo shook his head, but there was something in his eyes that looked almost like admiration. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. Takes one to know one. The night of the operation arrived with brutal efficiency. The mansion in Greenwich was exactly as ridiculous as Evelyn expected. Enormous, opulent, filled with wealthy criminals pretending to be legitimate businessmen. Danwoo's team infiltrated as catering staff, blending seamlessly into the background. Evelyn wore a server's uniform, hair pulled back, face carefully neutral. She carried a tray of champagne flutes through the marble hallways, invisible in the way all service workers are invisible to the wealthy. Her target was the study on the 2nd floor, a private room where Chairman Park and Vincent Yoon would meet to finalize their plans. The device she needed to plant was tiny, concealed in a coin that she could slip between cushions or behind books. She made it to the 2nd floor without incident. The study door was unguarded. Everyone was focused on the main gathering downstairs. She slipped inside, heart pounding, and scanned the room for the perfect hiding spot. A bookshelf, classic, unobtrusive. She wedged the coin between two leather-bound volumes and turned to leave. Chairman Park was standing in the doorway. "You're not one of my regular staff," he said, his voice smooth and dangerous. Evelyn's training kicked in. "Stay calm, play the role. I'm with the catering company, sir, just looking for the restroom." "The restroom isn't on this floor." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "And catering staff don't carry weapons." Evelyn's blood ran cold. She hadn't thought he could see the small pistol concealed at her ankle. "I don't know what you—" "Don't," his voice hardened. "I know who you are, Miss Carter. I've seen your photograph. You're the woman with Dan Wu's bastard child." Evelyn straightened, abandoning the pretense. "And you're the man who's been trying to kidnap my son." "Business is business, nothing personal." He pulled out his phone. "Vincent will be very pleased to hear you've delivered yourself directly to us. It saves him the trouble of extraction." Evelyn's mind raced. She was trapped. The door was blocked. She had maybe 30 seconds before more of his people arrived. Then the lights went out. The entire mansion plunged into darkness as Dan Wu's team cut the power. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She dropped to the floor and rolled toward where she knew a window was located. Chairman Park cursed, fumbling in the darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, dim red, just as Evelyn reached the window. She could see the grounds below, too far to jump, but there was a trellis covered in ivy. She smashed the window with her elbow, painful but effective, and climbed out onto the trellis just as Chairman Park's reinforcements burst into the study. The escape from the mansion was a blur of adrenaline and terror. Evelyn climbed down the trellis, scratching her arms on rose thorns, and hit the ground running. Dan Wu's team had secured vehicles at the property's edge, and she made it to one just as gunfire erupted from the mansion. "Did you plant it?" Junho demanded as he threw the car into drive. "Yes, but Chairman Park saw me. He knows I was there." Junho's expression flickered with concern, but he kept driving. "The recordings will still work. His knowledge doesn't change that." Behind them, the mansion was in chaos. Dan Wu's team had done their job, multiple devices planted throughout the property, capturing every conversation, every plan, every confession. When the recordings went public 12 hours later, the destruction was complete. Chairman Park was arrested at his Manhattan office, surrounded by federal agents and news cameras. Vincent Yoon was captured at JFK, trying to board a private jet to Seoul. Their empires crumbled overnight. Business partners fled. Political connections evaporated. Everything they had built turned to ash. And in a penthouse in Tribeca, Evelyn held her son and watched the news coverage with tears streaming down her face. It was over. They were safe. 6 months later, the world looked completely different. Dan Wu had spent the intervening months restructuring his empire. The illegal operations were systematically shut down or transferred to trusted associates who could run them independently. His focus shifted entirely to legitimate business, real estate development, tech investments, import-export of legal goods. It wasn't a complete transformation. He was still a powerful man with powerful connections, but he was no longer the creature of violence he had been. He was becoming something new, something better for his son. Evelyn finished her nursing degree. She graduated with honors, Dan Wu and Marissa cheering from the audience while Junho held Caleb in the back row. She had job offers from 3 different hospitals, and she chose the one that would give her the best work-life balance. She also moved out of the Tribeca penthouse. Not because she was running, but because she needed to prove, to herself and to Dan Wu, that she could stand on her own feet. She found a beautiful brownstone in Park Slope, Brooklyn, in one of the most desirable neighborhoods in the city. It had a small backyard and a nursery with big windows and a kitchen where she could actually cook. Dan Wu helped her move in, though he didn't say much. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the desire to keep her close warring with his respect for her independence. "I'm not disappearing," she told him, reading his expression. I'm just building my own life. There's a difference. I know, it's just harder than I expected, not having you nearby. You're welcome here anytime. Caleb needs his father. And his mother. Does she need anything? Evelyn paused, considering the question carefully. She needs time. She needs trust to be rebuilt. She needs to see that the man who broke her heart has actually changed. How do I prove that? By showing up, every day, consistently. Not because you're afraid of losing me, but because you want to be present. Danwoo nodded slowly. I can do that. Then do it, and we'll see what happens. The months that followed were a slow dance of rebuilding. Danwoo came to the brownstone every evening he wasn't traveling for business. He learned to change diapers without gagging. He mastered the art of bottle preparation. He spent hours on the floor with Caleb, playing with blocks and stuffed animals, speaking to his son in a mixture of English and Korean. He also learned to be present for Evelyn in ways that didn't involve grand gestures or dangerous rescues. He brought her coffee when she was studying. He listened when she talked about her patients and her frustrations. He learned the small, ordinary rhythms of domestic life. And slowly, carefully, Evelyn's walls began to come down. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. The wounds he had inflicted were too deep for that kind of clean resolution. But it was something adjacent to forgiveness, acceptance, perhaps, understanding, a willingness to move forward instead of remaining trapped in the past. One evening, about 10 months after the siege, Danwoo arrived at the brownstone to find Evelyn waiting on the front steps. Caleb was with Marissa inside, and the evening air was warm with the last breath of summer. Walk with me, Evelyn asked. They walked through the tree-lined streets of Park Slope, past brownstones and coffee shops and young families enjoying the evening. They didn't speak for several blocks, simply existing in each other's presence. Finally, Evelyn stopped beneath a streetlight. She turned to face Danwoo. I need to say something, and I need you to just listen. Okay. When you left me last year, you broke something in me that I didn't know could break. I was pregnant, alone, terrified, and the man I loved had vanished like I never mattered. I spent months crying myself to sleep, wondering what I had done wrong, why I wasn't enough to make you stay. Danwoo's expression was pained, but he stayed silent as she had asked. And then everything happened. The threats, the running, the siege. I watched you stand in front of bullets for our son. I watched you tear apart your own empire to keep us safe. I watched you become someone I didn't know you could be. She reached out and took his hand. I'm not saying I forgive you. I'm not sure forgiveness is even the right word for what happened between us. But I'm saying that I see who you are now. I see the father you've become. I see the man who shows up every day, not because he has to, but because he wants to. Danwoo's hand tightened around hers. I'm saying that I'm willing to try, really try. Not just coexisting as Caleb's parents, but building something real. Something that might look like love if we give it enough time. Evelyn, I know it won't be easy. I know there's still pain and trust issues and a million reasons why this is complicated. But I also know that I've never felt about anyone the way I felt about you, even when I was furious and heartbroken. And I think I owe it to myself, and to us, to see if that feeling can grow into something lasting. Danwoo was quiet for a long moment. Then he stepped closer, cradling her face in his hands. I have loved you since the night we met, he said softly. I loved you when I was too afraid to admit it. I loved you when I convinced myself I had to leave. I loved you every day of those 7 months when I thought I would never see you again. Tears were forming in Evelyn's eyes. I don't deserve your second chance, I know that. But if you're willing to give me one, I will spend every day earning it. I will show up, every single time, no matter what. I will be the father Caleb deserves and the man you need. I will spend the rest of my life making up for the pain I caused you. That's a lot of promises. I've never meant anything more. Evelyn laughed through her tears, a watery, hopeful sound. Then I guess we're doing this. Danwoo kissed her. Softly at first, tentative, asking permission. Then deeper as she responded, pulling him closer, letting go of the last of her resistance. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard. The streetlight above them flickered like it was blessing the moment. "Should we tell Caleb he's officially getting a two-parent household?" Danwu asked. "He's 10 months old. He doesn't care about anything except his stuffed elephant and making a mess with his baby food." "Fair point." They walked back to the brownstone hand in hand, the evening settling around them like a promise. 1 year later. The backyard of the brownstone was filled with the sounds of laughter and life. Caleb, now almost 2 years old, toddled across the grass chasing bubbles that Marissa was blowing for him. His amber eyes, his father's eyes, his great-grandmother's eyes sparkled with pure joy. Danwu stood at the grill, attempting to flip burgers with mixed success. He had come a long way from the man who didn't know how to hold a baby, but cooking was still a work in progress. Junho sat at the patio table, looking almost relaxed for once. He was technically off-duty, though Evelyn suspected he never fully stopped working. And Evelyn herself stood on the back porch, watching her family with a heart so full it almost hurt. Family, that's what they were now. Not the family she had imagined when she was young, not the simple, uncomplicated life she had dreamed of, but something richer. Something forged in fire and fear and the stubborn refusal to give up. Danwu caught her eye from the grill and smiled. A real smile, the kind that had become more frequent over the past year. The kind that made him look younger, softer, more like the man she had fallen in love with in that jazz bar a lifetime ago. She smiled back. Later that evening, after Caleb was asleep and Marissa had retreated to the guest room, and Junho had departed with a rare, genuine goodbye, Danwu and Evelyn sat together on the porch swing. The fireflies were beginning to emerge, tiny lights dancing across the darkening yard. "I have something for you," Danwu said. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Evelyn's heart rate spiked. "It's not what you think," he added quickly. "Not yet. I know you're not ready for that, and I'm not going to rush you." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a single small diamond. Not an engagement ring, something subtler. "It's a promise ring," he explained. "A promise that I'll wait as long as you need, that I'm not going anywhere, that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here." Evelyn took the ring, turning it over in her fingers. It caught the porch light and sparkled. "You really have changed," she said softly. "I had good motivation." She slipped the ring onto her right hand, not her left, not yet, but close enough. A step in the right direction. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for fighting for us, for becoming someone I can believe in. Thank you for giving me the chance." They sat together as the night deepened, watching the fireflies, listening to the quiet sounds of the city around them. Two people who had been broken, who had found each other, who had somehow, against all odds, built something worth keeping. Inside the house, their son slept peacefully, dreaming whatever Bobbies dream about. Outside, his parents held hands and watched the stars appear, one by one. The story that had started with chaos and fear, and a crying baby on a mahogany desk had ended somewhere entirely different. Somewhere warm, somewhere safe. Somewhere like home. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Drop a comment below telling me what you thought. I read every single one and I love hearing from you. And if you haven't already, share this video with someone who loves a good story. Until next time, take care of yourselves.